A very good morning. You find us in a pre-show conversation with a guest here. Of course, I'll be introducing the guest very shortly, but we come on air in light of what is no doubt a somber moment for the country. Today, the deceased, I must be very specific, the deceased Speaker of Parliament, Right Honourable Jacob Oulanyah, will be interred to his final resting place in Alalogi sub-county in Omoro district. That is where his final journey ends. And like for any person out there, when you're born, there is always the inevitability of death, and when you shall be interred into your last resting place, which is the grave. We shall be speaking of the man's legacy, of course, as we have done in the past 2 weeks since the announcement of his death was made by the president on 30th of March. Joining me on set is Opio Okalero, the spokesperson for the Democratic Party. We shall also be joined by Joseph Ochieno, a political analyst who is on Zoom, and of course he is in Lira City, from where he will be speaking to us. A very warm welcome, gentlemen. A very good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. And good morning to our viewers.
Thank you for making time for the show. It is a somber mood, no doubt. And of course, welcome to Joseph Ochieno, who is speaking to us from Lira. I bet you can hear me. Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on this somber morning. Yes, I am at Lira City, and I will be at Omoro within the next couple of hours to join the rest of the country to send off my good brother, Jacob Oulanyah, who has, in his short 57 years of life, touched this country and possibly shocked this country by touching a little more than everyone else thought he had done thus far.
Of course, we shall be looking at lessons for politicians on what they can do right in terms of the conduct of political business, even including public service and debate within Parliament, something that the man espoused, and the quality that he wanted. Can they actually stand up and be counted like he was? And also look at what the country has to do going forward in light of churning out leaders of his caliber who can be able to steer the economy. Of course, Mr. Okalero, the death of the Speaker of Parliament was something that was of a shock to the country. Up to now, there are elements who are yet to come to terms with it, away from the immediate family. That is perfectly understandable. How did his death, how did you take the whole news of his death? What was your immediate thought?
Well, first of all, on individual basis, when I heard the news of the passing on of the former Speaker, Right Honourable Speaker now, I couldn't believe it. You know, I got it by a screenshot of a tweet.
Yeah.
Tweet. So I could not believe it until I had to verify it, because it is something that is that was actually unbelievable. Remember, his sickness had been concealed from the public for quite some time. So if it had been on for a long time in the public, before the public, probably it would not bring that shock. But in a few months, when he was taken to Seattle, communication came through that he had passed on. And following the tweet that was made by the President General and then the Right Honourable Anita Mong about his health, they said he was improving. So we had hopes.
You had hope.
Unfortunately, things went the way they did. And yeah, we are sorrowful.
Joseph Ochieno, Mr. Okalero Opio speaks of shock and the disbelief that came with the news of the Speaker's demise. What was your, how did you receive the news on your part, and was it something that completely threw you off balance, or like, given the fact that he had been taken to hospital and there was news of his apparent treatment and a response to some of the treatment that was being administered, how did it get to you at the core of your person?
In my case, the news was disappointing and sad, but it's not that it was particularly unexpected because, as you rightly suggest, Jacob had been quite unwell. The dramatic circumstance under which he was airlifted abroad basically meant that he was, generally critically ill. But it is to an extent true that because of the mixed messages that kept on being churned by both the state and the relevant other authorities, there were always hope and expectations that the situation would turn around. But sort of leading to it, we all know when the president sent, Mr. Museveni sent a team, of government officials that included also my good brother Norbert Mao, it was very clearly the case that the situation was not particularly good. So in a way, it did not come as a surprise, except that death is death. We rarely want it, regardless of age, regardless of circumstance. So it was really hope against hope that it would not happen. But I mean, that said, really, perhaps, like I said at the introduction, the shocking thing is that whereas there were protests around Jacob's treatment, his airlifting abroad, the fact that several government officials had to fly themselves into Seattle, including our own health minister, the country kept on wondering, what if it were somebody else? But beyond that, once Jacob passed, and this is, I think, the beauty of this country and the beauty of Africa generally when it comes to the dead, although sometimes perhaps we should do slightly more to the living rather than, if we value life that very much, we should do more to the living and make sure that actually we build equipment, we build institutions, we build systems that ensure that we minimize death of our peoples. But immediately that happened, you suddenly quickly realize how big my young brother Oulanyah was and is as up to today. So meaning therefore that today, seemingly all roads lead to tomorrow. So I think it's a powerful lesson to people in politics and politicians that if we want to get into politics, whatever it is the case, we must work with the integrity, we must work with probity, we must pick a particular element of that which we believe in and run with it big. And if to do so, maybe we need to be able to review. If we're going to go to politics, we're also going to be going to public life. So our lives will be under massive scrutiny. So once there is need for balance in terms of our private lives, and then I think you guys in the media are absolutely in responsible positions to make sure that we balance this. At the end of the day, those of us who go into politics, and I mean politics amongst everything else, we should be prepared to know that we will have scrutiny as far as our jobs and responsibilities are, including our lives, except, of course, it's important that our private lives should by and large remain private, especially lives beyond the individual personalities, meaning lives that go to our siblings, our parents, and indeed our children.
Okay, thank you very much. He speaks very poignantly there about the need to be a little bit more responsive to the issues of the day, including your own health as a politician, as a leader, holding public office in the trust of the public. Sometimes it's okay to say, I need a sick leave, I need to attend to myself. It may not completely require you to reveal the extent of your condition, because that is a very private matter that should stay actually between the doctor and you. But does Uganda as a country deserve leaders or a new regime, that is in terms of dispensation of leadership, where we are open to the transcendental human issues, sickness, a failing? When you are grappling something and there is need to step back a little, you're human, it's acceptable. Shouldn't we as a people be agreeable to that?
Well, I think we are created differently.
Ah, okay.
Before I became the spokesperson of DP, I was living a free life, of course. I was not in the limelight.
You weren't in the limelight, no one was.
But when I assumed this leadership position, I started craving for my life that I lost. Because I had a private life. I was freely associating with people. But right now I cannot. There are some places, if I am to go there, I have to, dress in a particular way and shield myself. So I think we are different. We are created differently. So one may choose to take a matter of his or her sickness privately. And I wouldn't think that it would be appropriate to take that away from people. Let's leave that freedom to them. So when somebody elects to make it public, he can come up and declare it. If he doesn't, if he feels like he can still
it's
go.
also okay.
Yeah, but personally, I would do, if you were to ask me what I would do, I would definitely come up and do what you're suggesting. But that is me. It may not apply to another person. Yeah, so, but generally, I think his death gives us quite a number of lessons, if you may allow me to go there. As a leader, a young leader, I do strongly believe that working for the people should be given priority. It does not matter which political party that you belong to. It has manifested itself in the Right Honorable Speaker's death, former, that being from NRM cannot debar you, cannot bar you from working for the people. Because what we are seeing, everybody is celebrating Jacob Oulanyah's life. It does not matter the societal stratifications, it does not matter the political inclinations, it does not matter the religious affiliations. But everybody is grieved, except a few. But I want to tell you that Uganda is a country that is in a state where if someone dies from the NRM, people celebrate. Now, for Jacob Oulanyah's death, I think the grief has suppressed the celebrations, the isolated celebrations. I think this you can realize. If you track the streets of Twitter and Facebook, you can notice that. So the lesson to take home for politicians is when you're given an opportunity to serve, don't work on self-aggrandizement and gathering an opulence of wealth for yourself and for your personal benefit. Work for the people. The Right Honorable Speaker, former, was constructing a building. I think he knew that he had a few days on earth because he knew his situation. He would have, you know, made some funny deals and acquired the money to complete his house as early as possible, such that he can sleep in it. He didn't. He didn't. Yeah, and yet he had an opportunity, and there were channels where he could do that.
Yeah, and I think given his salary and the perks that come with being speaker, deputy speaker for 10 years, I think he was in a position to.
Yeah, he would, because he was in that position where he could access public funds, but he elected not to channel it in a manner that
we do not know about
himself.
That, and we cannot discuss whether he actually did or not.
Of course, we are discussing that based on the influence.
Yeah. He's on record, for example, at one of the events in 2020, should be 2021, where at Kololo, he publicly said, all of us are corrupt. We are talking about corruption, but we are getting away from here and we are returning to corrupt ways. So ideally, some people might look at it as a self-confession that is honest, that perhaps once in a while he can siphon a few shillings or coins for his own aggrandizement. Others might look at it as a case of a man trying to make a blanket statement in order to deliver the message to the corrupt persons. But let me just go to Mr. Joseph Otieno. Yesterday, there was a joint council meeting of the districts of Gulu, Omoro, and Noya. And there was also hopes that Karamoja would be brought on board so that this is an annual event, more like a memorial, to be able to foster cohesion. No doubt the man in his death is still fostering unity. He was a light for the region that is still no doubt coming out of the effects of the LRA insurgency, and the dimming of this light, the candle going out, kind of speaks to more what I can describe as a gap that has been left. I don't know whether leaders within the region or you, opinion leaders and political analysts, are looking at possibilities of who will come on board, who is being fronted, not to replace him as MP and national vice chairperson, but as a strong leader within the region. Just take us through what is the sentiment among the opinion leaders and the politicians in the region.
I am not very much familiar with the local politics, particularly at a local government level. But really from the legislative level and above, it is something that most other Ugandan observers would know, that the North and East suffered huge brutality under this regime, and it was actually just rebuilding. And one of Jacob's hallmark is his contribution to the peace process. I wrote this in my opinion column, and so there is an element of that in my Sunday column next about Jacob and part of his contribution to this. And it is important also to say that actually the fact that this is coming from him and about him rather than many others actually show that, yes, as I said before, he became a rather big politician. I think really, I don't think this is something that can be confined to the personality of Jacob Oulanyah, although actually his death and some of the reactions that came, for which I really don't want to go to the day of his burial, I think tells that I think leaders, both local and national, from these communities, I hope will be very much awake tomorrow morning to a new reality that there is need for them not only to organize and work together in unity, but perhaps to begin to critique government programs and projects, including government's own historical records in creating the state in which this sub-region is in at the moment. It is symbolic that I came from Tororo, or rather from Kampala via Tororo, and deliberately sat in Lira. Of course, there was the issue whether or not I should go to Lira with my other colleagues, including a fairly big team coming from here. But we elected to go via the east, partly because Lira Camden Road is extremely in a terrible state. So these are things that did not necessarily need Jacob Oulanyah. But you're quite right that one of his big moments was that powerful corruption speech and corruption speech facing Mr. Museveni. I think that's a powerful lesson for politicians going forward, especially anybody who want to claim a position of leadership. But don't forget, Jacob had a major issue himself, which possibly led to his losing of elections, and that is his role in the age limit debate. I was extremely disappointed myself, personally. But as I said, he rehabilitated himself to me in the last 12 months, when I actually suddenly realized that I actually come to think of it, there is something about this man. Like him or not, he sticks to his line. He speaks big. He pushes his agenda. He was in Uganda People's Congress. He found it in his interest, whatever the reason, we never go to discuss this. He went to NRM, and he went during broad daylight. And from then on, he actually grew in there. One, because the guy is intelligent, sharp, articulate, and very decisive. And then, do you know what? I first came to know of his name when he was shot at as a student at Makerere University. At the time, I was leading the external campaigns for the return to multipartyism in this country. And Jacob Oulanyah was there. So maybe that is part of the issue, that perhaps it is less about the mistakes that you make, but rather, one, the objects about which you intend to do these things. Not everyone will necessarily agree with you, but you take ownership, you own it to it quickly. Once Oulanyah joined NRM, I never heard him criticize Uganda People's Congress. One of the other reasons for which you see the whole country is around with him was that he was a collegiate politician. And one thing that I'm going to miss about him in the next 4 years was whether or not, as the new speaker, the commitment is actually given to reform of parliament. The commitment is actually given to pushing parliamentarians to up their qualities in terms of legislation debate, checking the executive, checking the judiciary, delivering for the people as legislators, whether or not if big agenda issues came, which is contrary to the interests of the National Assembly, meaning Parliament and the people, maybe standing up especially to the executive, he would be able to do so. I think that is the big thing that we are going to be missing about Jacob Oulanyah. And if there are any legislators who need to pick up lessons from this, they need to pick up that whatever it is, they need to be taking a position and run with it.
Analysis there, we shall be delving into the man's defense of decorum, the rules and traditions of Parliament a little bit later in this show. But let me return to Mr. Okalere Opio, the spokesperson for the Democratic Party. Oulanyah was initially a member of the Uganda People's Congress, and many looked at his transition from UPC to the National Resistance Movement as an opportunistic move. When you see that you can no longer achieve the things you want to achieve, including political power, and perhaps in the way things work within this country, political and personal aggrandizement. When he switched to the National Resistance Movement, no doubt everything began to play into the kind of what we've come to see, the quick succession, Deputy Speaker, National Vice Chairperson for the National Resistance Movement, then eventually becoming the Speaker of Parliament. Many look at his demise as a case of a fruit that has fallen unripe. What is the true potential that the country could have realized if Oulanyah had lived?
Well, first of all, we are living in a country where the systems of governance are broken down, where institutions are fused
With the state.
with the state, and it is very difficult to distinguish an institution from another. Now, in the NRM, as a party, you realize that there are members there who are living under, I would say, duress or under the fear to speak out certain things to the power that be. And I want to tell you that the fallen Right Honorable Speaker has been one of those people who could unequivocally come up to speak the truth to the power that be. So we are going to lose that because we definitely need it in the NRM. I want to tell you, when we are building political parties,
you say when you say
we need it as Ugandans.
Oh, okay.
We need.
Somebody out there was going to
no,
say, hey.
as Ugandans, we need some people in the NRM that speak truth to power.
That's now clear.
Yeah, so definitely we are going to lose him. I want to tell you, I want to remind you of a scenario in Colorado that you brought yourself. He spoke out his mind. He was clear-headed. By speaking that nobody of us is innocent, that meant, of course, literally, it is the president, an event that the president is attending, is the one who has gathered that, I mean, he was organized and is the chief gatherer.
Yeah.
So, literally, he was saying that the president who is seated there is the chief of the corrupt. That is what his words meant. So, he spoke it, and that was the truth. You get the point? So, we need people who come up openly to tell the king that you are seated badly, openly. And Oulanyah was one of those people. So going forward, we shall miss that side of him. And then the other thing is, I had a lot of hopes in him in transforming the House, the quality of debate. I want to tell you, truth be told, the quality of members of parliament that we have, not all of them, but many of them, I would say, I think it is somehow wanting. So there needed an experienced, a seasoned legislator in the position of the speaker who could actually train and take through these new members of parliament, the legislative process and how they are to conduct themselves, such that we have an august house, in the real meaning of the word august, a dignified house. A
dignified house.
Yes. So definitely in that area, we shall also miss his contribution. We may get somebody who is like him or who has a semblance of his qualities, but definitely we shall not get a person that is him or that can do what the Right Honorable Speaker could do. You can see it in his demise also.
Very quickly.
Yeah. So definitely that is it. But the other thing also, there are very many lessons that we keep on learning, that we are learning from him. There is a time he talked about, he addressed the issue of the nodding disease syndrome.
He was very passionate about it.
He was very passionate about it. He did not actually consider the position that he was holding. Because some people would fear to come out openly and say, but you are the deputy speaker. Why are you only appearing to be speaking for a particular area?
Okay.
But I think the lesson there is, if you are a leader, before you extend your love to other areas, let us first see that love in your area, where you are born.
Where you're born.
It's like love.
Very quickly.
You cannot love another person if you don't love yourself. Upon that, allow me use disappointed, because I learned to remind the government that they should actually take all necessary measures to quell the cattle rustling that is happening in Teso sub-region, because I hail from there. It is a serious issue. People are dying, and Greater Karamoja.
Good.
The people are dying, and the government has got the mandate. It's actually a solo duty of government to protect the people, lives, and their property.
Yeah, of course, that's a conversation that NTV amplifies on a daily basis, what is going on in the Karamoja region. Time now for a short break, but Mr. Joseph Otieno, who is joining us on a line from Lira City, we understand he is due to travel to Omoro, where the last service shall be held for the deceased speaker. And when we come back from the break, you will be talking to us about the potential of Jacob Oulanyah that we might never be able to see as a country. Could he have gone on to become president? And what kind of president, for example, would he make? But as we break, let me quickly just take you through what is no doubt one of my best tributes that I've read in the papers and of course online. This one comes from Norbert Mao, a man who was as close to Jacob Oulanyah as any friend can be. When Jacob's grave is closed, it will close over a man who has gone too soon and whose best years of public service were still ahead. Another fruit fallen unripe. A man such as Jacob could not die without leaving an immense void in our national political life. He has been closely and for a long time part and parcel of the history of our country and events that have defined this particular journey. To that extent, Jacob's death has strummed the chords of public sympathy. As a human being, he is normal. He is normal as the representative of the people of Omoro County in the 11th Parliament, normal as the man who lit up any social gathering with his heartful laughter, animated conversations, social graces, and dancing strokes. Could he make a president? And if he were, for example, to become a president, what kind of president would he be? Joseph Otieno, what's your take?
I think that is actually very interesting. To be fair to God and to be fair to death, I think Jacob Oulanyah, in the short life in the National Assembly and the short life including student politics, presented a possibility of anybody who can be anything really in this country, considering that since independence, the kind of leaders that we've got, including some of those who went on to stay for slightly longer than 5 years. You know, so no, this is a very solid lawyer. This is a very solid activist. This is a very articulate guy. This is a very detailed guy. This is a very deep guy. This is a very frank guy. This is a very considerate guy at the same time. But somebody who's also very much driven and resolute and purposeful. So he showed all that. As I said, the first time I heard his name and got involved with him was when he was shot at as a student at Makerere University. So he's been an activist. He's been sort of everything. He stood for what he believes in. Those are the leadership that we want in Africa, and those are the kind of leadership that we want in this country. And those are the leadership that UPC, by the way, chants in this country. We chanted them before, we are chanting them today, and we chant them in the future. But those, by and large, should be the kind of leadership that should be chanted across the political divide. And let me tell you something. I'm not quite sure that it is up to Parliament, the National Assembly, to create and train and guide and turn ordinary individuals into politicians. I think what is lacking in this country is because people stumble into Parliament and sometimes into politics accidentally. We possibly end up with people in positions of leadership who don't have the capacity to do so. I said, I think, on this program, but in a different context sometime before, that really in a UPC government or leadership that in which I am, I don't see how somebody emerges to become a parliamentary candidate. somebody emerges to become capable of becoming a legislator representing UPC values in the National Assembly, who does not have the capacity to guide and to lead. That is why you see the likes of Oulanyah who would have come by UPC. So in a way, there is an element of this. So there's a cultural element to this thing. And I'm not making this a party political thing. There's a cultural element to that. And maybe my colleagues in the political leadership ought to be seeing what we're trying to talk about, particularly if we want to build a nation that is going to encourage young people to take on the mantle beyond Jacob Oulanyah and deliver this country, because I believe that the best of this country is for it. Now, in the event that he went beyond speaker, and you can't really have ruled out any of those things from Jacob Oulanyah, I think we would have a leader, as I said, who's bold, who's purposeful, but a leader who you would not necessarily second guess. As I said, the two disappointments I had with him are very clear. When he nearly made Jesus' case on Museveni, I was very disappointed, but he did. And then his role in the constitutional amendments for age limit, rather for term limits, I believe, his contribution to it, he paid for it with the electoral mandate, which is basically what democracy should be all about. He paid for it. But beyond that, then the third one, of course, was when he joined NRM. Those were my disappointment. But on the joining of NRM, in the UPC, we believe that this is a basic fundamental right of an individual who, upon conscience, opts to join a political party, organization, or social group of their choice. In this case, Jacob Oulanyah believed that this was now his route, went in his route in broad daylight. And this I'm saying deliberately to all people in politics. Don't stand on the fence. Take a position and run with it. And I think that is what Jacob Oulanyah would have run with it. You know what? A possibly President Jacob Oulanyah would possibly be different from a President Museveni. When things fail, he would go to the country and say, fellow citizens, we tried our level best. This one failed. We intended to deliver it for you. We did not. Instead of having leaders like Museveni who would go ahead and blame everybody except themselves. Maybe those are some of the lessons. But very quickly, I think one other thing that we would get from Jacob Oulanyah, which I now take back to a President Museveni, it is actually the burden of responsibility for Mr. Museveni to ensure that legislators, or the other arms of government are not bribed, the other arms of government are not bullied, the other arms of government are not scared from holding back their capacities, their abilities, and the positions and doing their jobs. Unless we are able to do that, in fact, whether it was a Jacob Oulanyah in the National Assembly seat as Speaker over the next 5 years, we're still going to have problems. And as I said, it would have been very interesting to see how it emerged in that sense. But other than that, I think a Jacob Oulanyah leadership of the future, which never is one in which Mr. Museveni takes the burden of responsibility that, well, we need to create more Jacob Oulanyahs out of NRA, hopefully, but of course we have many Jacob Oulanyahs in Uganda People's Congress. We are waiting really that once we rest our brother, we resettle as a nation, we reconcile as a nation, we heal as a nation, including some of the conversations that involve the CJ and others, or rather motive issues. And some of them were things were possibly ill-advised from both sides, in a particular way, a lack of leadership, but that's the mire in which we are as a country. Be able to pull forward and go forward. And as I said, the best for this country is in the future, and that best has got to be led by a sense of sovereignty and openness. And Jacob Oulanyah provided a bit of that. And quick thing, the biggest hope, I think, for him in this sub-region was his ability to go across communities, mobilize the West Nile sub-region, mobilize Lango sub-region, mobilize the Chole sub-region, mobilize Karamoja sub-region, find people like myself from Nagongoro, Chororo, who feel part of this, and above all, be that legislator who somebody from Tungamo feels is a brother. That is the Republic of Uganda that we want. That is the leadership that I think we miss from Jacob Oulanyah. But Jacob Oulanyah attempted to put that for us on the table. And I think beyond today, it is possible for us to be able to deliver. But that requires leadership from beyond myself and others. And I hope Mr. Museveni is able to lead us on that. Other than that, some people will be crying merely crocodile tears, and I really hope not.
Joseph Osheno for that. Opio Okalero, do you agree with Joseph that there's a lot, of course, that could have come out of Jacob Oulanyah in terms of potential for greater positions of leadership and or power? What's your take?
First of all, I want to make some simple clarification.
We'll be glad.
That I want to agree with my senior comrade that it's not a duty of Parliament to make good leaders, but rather a duty of the political institutions or political parties. But what
or even the leaders themselves?
But what do you do? What do you do in the event that people who are political novices find themselves in Parliament? You have to do what we call risk management. So I think presence of a seasoned politician, a fine legislator in the capacity of Jacob Oulanyah in the position of speakership could definitely do us good in trying to, manage the risk that would come if we only let the House have people who are half-baked. I do not doubt the capacity of Jacob Oulanyah, the capacity that he had. And I am without doubt that if he was able to get to position number 3 in the order of precedence of persons in this country, that could definitely fuel my belief that it was even possible that he would become number 1. Yeah, because he had whatever it takes. But I want this to be a lesson to the young politicians, that when you serve well, when you are honest, God can lift you from one level to another. I do not want to believe that Jacob joined the NRM because he wanted to pursue the opportunities therein.
There were better advantages.
I do not want to believe that that he joined because he wanted to. Anyway, just making inferences. I think based on what he has done, he joined to get a clear platform where he can serve his people, because he has indeed done that. Now, about the issue of constructing more Jacob Oulanyahs, it is possible. But in the country that Uganda finds itself, in the state that Uganda finds itself in, we need to develop political institutions. We need to deliberately develop political institutions such that we give politicians, young politicians, the training that they ought to have in order to appear at a national level to serve the people. In IDP, we are doing that. I want to thank the organizers that today they have hosted the members from the 2 historical political parties. That is a plus for the organizers.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so we have been doing this as Democratic Party for the last 67 years. And we shall continue doing that. At least that commitment, we do give it to Ugandans.
Just a reminder that some of the pictures you're seeing there of what is currently going on at the grounds where the service, the very last one indeed, in what has become one of the most elaborate mourning procedures the country has seen in recent history, is rolling out. What you see are mourners, including government officials, members of the diplomatic corps, other dignitaries, of course the residents of Moro, who are still struggling to, of course, take in the news of the unfortunate demise of the son of the soil, Speaker Right Honorable Jacob Oulanyah. His casket was airlifted to Lalogi Primary School on Wednesday by a UPDF chopper, and the anger, the frustration and the sorrow, I must be very specific about that, because when you lose somebody, many times there is that anger that comes. It's not anger that either somebody has killed him or killed her. The anger that somebody has gone is something that people do grapple with, especially in the search for closure. When we put ourselves in the shoes of the residents of Omoro, this is no doubt a gentleman who was huge in all aspects, in terms of stature, but also a larger-than-life character, flamboyant. He's one who loved to dance to the Bola performance. He's one who loved to engage with people. And very often, as I read earlier in a tribute that was written by Norbert Mao, he had the infectious laughter and the ability to make people around him feel happy. That charm. I don't know whether you had an opportunity to engage with him, either at a social gathering. What is the man away from the Speaker of Parliament, the overly sharp bow tie wearing and clad in these very classic suits, no doubt, the gentleman who would glide on the floor dancing to this music? Did you experience that other part of Jacob Oulanyah?
Yeah, I did. But I think there is a big lesson to learn when it comes to distinguishing or drawing a distinction between your political life
and your personal private life. Yeah.
So for Right Honorable Jacob Oulanyah, the former Speaker, I think he lived his life. He was himself. He could not actually consider the views of people who would, who would take him, who would judge him. There is one video that I watched. I think it was in Apa, where he met the locals, and he humbled himself, sat down, and he ate from the same plate with them. Ate what they were eating.
That's right.
Now, to find such a man, it's not easy. Because merely, if you were given a small, just to lead, I would say maybe a wedding meeting. Some people, when they are given just to lead a wedding meeting, they wield all sorts of power. You get the point. But this is a man who could humble himself.
That's an interesting anecdote.
If he found, if there was a function, he could join in. I wish, in fact, I want to be like him.
Okay.
I would say. So he has been an inspiration to many young politicians and old, in the sphere, in various spheres. In matters of law, today at Makerere University, the Makerere Law Society, you see there is that association of students who do law.
That's right.
They are having a gala in commemoration of his works.
The gala, where is the gala?
It is in Makerere University.
Makerere University.
Yes,
Later
Makerere
today?
University. Today it's beginning at, I think it is beginning at 9
it's underway.
a.m.
Okay.
Yes, underway. So you find if the leadership of an association of students can go to the extent of dedicating their day to a particular person, in commemoration of a particular person, then you can tell the impact that person's life has had on them.
Okay, let's just bring in Joseph Ochenyo on this particular aspect of Jacob Oulanyah's life. The president, in his speech, was very unequivocal in urging politicians in the country to be very careful about what he described as a reckless life. I do not want to throw any judgment here with regard to how Oulanyah lived his life, but I want to put specific concern or the spotlight on the president's call for politicians to be able to, glide well in terms of public service, political life, and then their personal private lives. I don't know what your take is on how Oulanyah lived his life. Of course, he was a man who was flamboyant, and we cannot fault him for that. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I got bits of that in passing, but as I said, indeed, that all of us have got rights to our private lives, only to an extent. The question of, and it was raised much earlier, about the anger of the community in the North, about the life and the passing of Jacob Oulanyah. Yes, it's traditionally natural that we tend to miss and we lose and we grieve and we mourn. And in many cases, we normally say that in Africa, nobody dies without a witch, in others without a cause. And that, by and large, in science is proven the case. I think that I want to address myself very briefly to it. It was simply that it was a matter that was bungled by the manner in which it was clearly publicly communicated. At the level of the speaker, the third in line in the state, there is no reason why you don't clearly articulate that in chronological order and systematically, and as an update that the speaker is unwell, the conditions discussed with doctors, you possibly present it in such a manner that if anything happens, there is no doubt and no suspicion. But of course, unfortunately, again, I didn't really want to go into this. There has been a track record of people dying in this country in the last 10 to 15 years under dubious and suspicious circumstances. Many people died in the north around which many of these things happened. Now, whether or not these are things which are suspicious, I don't know. It has simply not been handled well. And when it came to Jacob Oulanyah, because he was rather himself in not so long ago, several months ago, members of his family, and indeed other members of the public, had really every right to place suspicion. So to an extent, it's just that. But also on the other hand, yes, we know that Jacob may or may not have had underlying conditions. But it was very clear that not so long ago, he was generally the flamboyant and the bubbly guy that you talk about, very, very actively active in both private and public life. And because it's capsized rather swiftly, there was every reason for that to happen. But I think it is also true that Jacob underwent 3 very rigorous campaigns: campaign for parliament, campaign for the leadership of the NRM, and then campaign for speakership. So it will take a storm.
One of his very famous phrases said, "The evil that men do lives with them. The good deeds that they do are buried with them." We do not want to believe that the good has been buried with Oulanyah, or rather will be buried with Oulanyah, as he's being interred later today. There is one particular thing that I would like to bring on board: the incident involving the Chief Justice, who happens to be was a friend of the late Speaker. The Chief Justice found himself in a tight spot when he was grieving. The anger perhaps took the better of him, and he made some statements that didn't augur well in as far as uniting Uganda was concerned at that particular moment in time. And then I think he was quick to act on it by going to Mengo, meeting the Prime Minister of Uganda, Charles Peter Mayiga, and making peace and ensuring that the discord that had been brought about by those remarks and had stoked a bit of talk on tribalism and everything that is ugly around that. Do we see Oulanyah's ability to reconcile pretty quickly playing out here through the Chief Justice? Because Oulanyah many times came out and said, "I forgive whoever has wronged me. Please, whoever I have wronged, forgive me." Well, another could say this is a man perhaps who was grappling with an ailment and knew that he didn't have a lot of time and he had to make a lot of peace. But it is a legacy that I, for example, see as something that was parted onto another person. Do you see politicians who can adopt this kind of way of doing things, apologizing and making peace?
Definitely they are. And you see, the fallen Right Honorable Speaker Jacob Oulanyah has left a legacy of reconciliation. There is a time we had the press conference at our headquarters and we were calling that let his legacy be reflected in our actions.
That's right.
And the action or the act of the Chief Justice at his position, going to Mengo to apologize, to make peace.
Yeah.
I think that is a good gesture. It's a gesture of reconciliation. The Chief Justice realized that our country is constructed on 2 pillars: the body politic, tribes, over 65 of them, and religion. And I think that's why when he went to Mengo, he was in the company of religious leaders.
Yeah.
Now, this is a truth that some people do not want to listen to, but it is how it is. Because the colonialists, when they came, they constructed Uganda out of those two. Now, any statements that could threaten the existence of the bonds that are holding the over 65 tribes and others that are not mentioned in the Constitution together, the bonds that are connecting the various religious sects together
within the country,
such statements should not find a way in Uganda. So the Chief Justice realized a little earlier the impact of the statements that he had made, and he had to make a public act that would atone and maintain the bonds intact.
No doubt.
Now, this is what we've been talking about as DP.
Very quickly.
We believe that our country, based on our history, characterized or tainted with various violent change of power. Many people spilled their blood. And therefore, we have some misunderstandings here and there. There needs somebody to do an act like that the Chief Justice did. We could have a national dialogue, a conversation, a national conversation. And we say, okay, in Mukura, in Iteso, people died. Who killed them? In Iruero, people died. Who killed them? In Kasese, people died. Who killed them? In Burucho, people died. Who killed them? We come on the round table. The opinion leaders, the religious leaders, the political leaders, and all key opinion leaders in various societies, such that we have a round table conversation. In fact, I want to applaud the Katikkiro of Buganda. When the Chief Justice made mention the statements as he did, the response, you can realize that the response of the Katikkiro of Buganda was one that is modifying. It was pacifying the situation. And I think that sent a signal
He's a man of measured
to the
words,
Chief Justice.
No doubt.
I think that sent a signal to the Chief Justice that we need to have a conversation.
Good.
And therefore, as a DP, we continue to call upon the dialogue so that we can have a conversation. We have
all right, let me throw this particular cluster of the conversation to Joseph Ocheno of the Uganda People's Congress. The Uganda People's Congress has in recent years grappled with faction and infighting, and the need to adopt a conciliatory tone from the leaders who are seeking office of president and any other positions within the party that has completely, arguably, thrown it off the political balance. You, as a member of the Uganda People's Congress, and one who apparently was seeking to be president ahead of any other contenders to that, do you see the Chief Justice's act of making peace with Mengo something that you can emulate within the party and also be part of extending the legacy of Jacob Oulanyah?
Just very clearly, it was me, actually, not followed then by my brother Olaro Tunu, who first tabled the question of National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I tabled it at a news conference at Uganda House in May, actually, 2005, raising the issues that my brother in the studios raised. The fact that we need to have a national conference, the fact that we need to have a national dialogue, the fact that we need to have a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And in my opinion, I suggest that we go way beyond and simply, perhaps if possible, before independence, but ideally from 1962. So that, yes, we debate who fired the first shot in Luwero and why. We debate who did what in Mukura. We debate who did and what were the circumstances and the massacres in Kasese. And we debate what my brother Lara calls genocide, effective genocide in northern Uganda, particularly Lango and Acholi in particular. We debate and have a conversation in that. Mr. Museveni has been in power for 36 years, going to be around 40. He's got the opportunity to be able to actually coalesce around the Oulanyah sentiment to create and make that possible. So it's extremely important. But on the other, the question about the colonialists, I think I am at a stage, as a leader and as somebody who's actually giving special sessions to young congressmen and women, about the future of this country, giving them possibilities and hope that the best of this country is in the future, and that best is in diversity. That, except for where the colonialists deliberately pushed the North, especially Langa Choli, mainly in the army and to an extent Teso in the police, and that the Musevenis came and very much broke this conversation around identity question that the Northerners were sort of guys who liked going to the army to do it. I think the colonists, these guys left us nearly 60 years ago. So I think most of really what's need to be done today is ourselves. I know they intervene at every time and every opportune moment, but that is why we require leadership. We need to reach a stage in which our national leaders, our leaders across political divides, including our local leaders, take a position and say that, look, this is a matter of national interest. We should deal with it ourselves as Ugandans. So yes, in the event that the national dialogue becomes a matter on the table, of course, the leaders at that table will be Uganda People's Congress, because we'll be the first people not only to raise this because of the first government at independence, but maybe we are also as much aggrieved, as we are actually the leaders pushing for national truth and reconciliation quickly. Remember, I was having a conversation last night when I arrived in Lira City. I was actually reminding people of how at independence, we deliberately went for a government of national unity to ask for DP. We had won the election, by the way, to ask for DP and KY to join us in a government of national unity because we wanted to heal the pre-colonial divide and create a new nation where all of us were together. It's Democratic Party that declined that. It was Benchuan who declined that offer, and that's how we ended up with a coalition government with KY. This is not political point scoring for this session, but just for guys to put that on record. So we started with this at independence. We wanted to live as a nation in diversity. The first UPC government had much more powerful ministers in Buganda than anywhere else in the rest of the country. Obote too, the most powerful ministers, the biggest number were from Ankole. UPC has done these things. We did it before. We want to be able to do it in the future. It is possible. We require national leadership for these things. You, particularly the young guys on the studios and the young guys watching us and the young guys watching the retirement of my brother into heaven today, and the young guys of the future, they need us to come together in diversity. The incidents involving the CJ, the incidents involving the trip to Mengo, shows that leaders have failed somewhere. They're dealing with symptoms, not the underlying issues of some of these other things. These things can be done. Milton, but I tried them before. I think our generation of leaders, and particularly younger, if we join hands with these things, it is very possible for us to be able to deal with it. It cannot be on terms that we do it, that we reconcile only on our terms. It has to be national. It has to be looking at Uganda holistically. It is possible.
Perspective regarding what politicians in the country can learn about the legacy of Jacob Oulanyah and the goodwill that comes with how he conducted himself in the service of the country. Your parting shots, Okaler Opio.
I want to take this opportunity to echo the statement that I made.
30 seconds.
The Right Honorable Jacob Oulanyah, the fallen son of Uganda, has left a legacy of reconciliation. I would say he has spent most of his time constructing it. It is constructed. We should not let it break down by making statements that in nature can cause disintegration of the same.
All right, thank you very much, Okaler Opio. And we are very constrained for time, Joseph Otieno, but your perspective and insight on the legacy of Jacob Oulanyah is no doubt well appreciated. Coming to us live from Lira, where you're due to travel from to go to Omoro and, of course, be part of the events to see off the fallen Speaker of Parliament.